This week on the Nonprofit Newsfeed, of course, brought to you by Whole Whale, a B Corp digital agency focusing on analytics and advertising and AI. My name is George Weiner. I'm the chief whaler of Whole Whale, and we have Nick Azoulay, digital strategist at Whole Whale. But you already knew that. You've listened to this before. We've got folks that have been reaching back out to us on the topics. We try to make this as helpful as possible for our nonprofit geeks out there, really focusing on the types of news that hopefully is actionable and informative for you. I think we went all in on AI. Surprise, but we did it with a nonprofit lens today, and I hope there's something of value for you. Nick, why don't you lead us into it?
Yeah, George, I guess you might be able to say this is our special AI edition of the podcast, but we wanted to frame it around, as you said, actionable takeaways for nonprofit organizations. And the first thing we wanted to talk about, George, was the skyrocketing bot server traffic that we are seeing across the internet and what that means for you and your nonprofit organization. So, George, we discovered this because we were shocked to discover that our recent server costs were skyrocketing while real traffic stayed the same. What is happening? AI companies' crawling behavior is straining servers across the internet. And George, search engines like Google and Bing have been doing this for a very long time, right? They crawl websites, they ingest that information, and they use that information to place sites into their index and then put them on result pages. But now with the advent of AI, everybody and their mother are crawling the entire internet. And those server requests are really adding up, George. And the unfortunate result of that is increased server load with minimal downstream traffic benefits. Now, who is likely getting hit the hardest? Most likely nonprofit organizations that provide free resources or have some kind of vast digital repository are probably seeing the biggest fluctuation here. So libraries, cultural organizations with digital archives like museums, educational institutions, knowledge commons like Wikipedia, and then researcher advocacy orgs with deep catalogs of content, analysis, etc. So this means that for many organizations, particularly those with a large online footprint, this could mean increased hosting bills, higher server usage requiring you to upgrade your plan, and performance degradation impacting real human users, right? If the load on your server is particularly high. So, George, why don't we talk about this? Well, we'll talk about what some folks are doing to mitigate this, but on the surface, what does this mean for nonprofits and how can they kind of see in their own data whether this is impactful?
Well, for one, this is a blind spot with the standard analytics that are shown to you. If in your mind you're like, well, I haven't seen this in my Google Analytics, stop for a second and realize that is a filtered view of non-bot traffic pretty much coming to your site as best as they can tell because of the way they use JavaScript, because of the way that they are trying to verify actual users and give you a real look. The true numbers are in some geeky log, terribly designed backend that you have to get to on the server side. And this is actually what you are at the end of the day paying for. You're paying for the amount of these sort of requests that come in. And the cost can come in the level that you pay. The cost can come in if you notice your site crashing more than usual because it's just getting overloaded. And you're like, I don't see that in my traffic. It's because all of these bots are demanding more. The metric, which was startling, and this was really put forward by Cloudflare. Cloudflare is it's a massive internet company that's in charge of caching and helping the stability of many websites and helps do that. But in the meantime, they get a view of a lot of the behavior of these bots. They were explaining how this particular metric, call it sort of crawls or scrapes per visit ratio, has gone completely bonkers. It used to, a decade ago, be like every 3 times or so that a site was scraped or crawled, you would get 1 visit. That ratio has spun out wildly, ranging from where Google is, which is roughly 10 to 1 now, 10 scrapes, requests per one visit, meaning that bot's coming in, doing what it is, sucking in pages, checking, validating, pulling information, doing something, to one visit. So that's a 10-to-1 ratio versus something like OpenAI, which is 1,600 scrapes per visit, versus at the most extreme, Anthropic at around 70,000 scrapes per visit. You see the problem. The ratio of scrapes to visits are starting to go into an unsustainable level. And we haven't fully realized it. Looking at our own data, I was like, what is going on? Our server costs keep going up for some of our applications, and we've had to migrate off of higher performance things just to get to higher volume things. I've had to trade and make this trade-off as sort of technical guidance here for whole whale properties. But quite literally, this has actually somewhat doubled in the last 9 months. There was a month in March before I started doing some of the blocking we'll get into, where basically 98% of what I was paying for in terms of visits was non-human. Put another way, we had 9,000 folks show up to one of our properties, one of our websites, and we had to pay for 400,000 visits, essentially requests coming to the server. That is unsustainable. Now, there are things that you can do to begin to block bots. However, it shouldn't be considered just like a light switch. Oh, great, just put up a wall, don't let anybody in. Well, part of your mission, part of our job is to educate people, to connect, find attention. If you basically say no one can come to our site, no one will come to your site. And that includes organic search. It will cut off a lot of folks and hurt usability. So this is still a developing field. Cloudflare has this option. There are other tools out there, like one called Anubis AI, which is free, but I don't recommend just sort of blanketly tossing it onto your site because it's somewhat extreme and can cause intense performance problems. But this is something to pay attention to. So one, do you have this problem? There are things that you can do to mitigate that, like regional blocking, types of bot traffic blocking. And the truth is it's complicated and you have to look at it.
Yeah, George, it is complicated, but I think it's worth talking about that the changes that Cloudflare is making to give administrators, website administrators, a little bit more control over when and how crawlers are accessing websites. So Cloudflare announced a couple weeks ago that they had, quote, created a content independence day, and we're going to start rolling out options for people at the DNS level, so at the server level, to begin blocking these crawlers. Cloudflare is kind of building that mechanism into its stack. And they're also rolling out a pay per crawl system. So it looks like they're looking towards potentially being like, hey, you want to come to this website, big AI company scraping all my content, you need to pay some kind of a gated fee for doing so. I think that that's kind of in the nascent stages, right? So we are getting some inklings of solutions to this from companies like Cloudflare, that middle internet stack type companies. But I think, George, as you said, it's worth going into and looking to see what data you do have on the server side, see if this is an issue, and then just kind of continue to think about it. But to your point, George, nonprofits, as much as they probably don't want to incur the costs of training everybody's AI, bot, scraper, etc., you also can't afford to not appear in AI results. So just blanketly turning off access to AI crawlers is also probably a worse idea and might decrease your traffic. So something kind of a tough needle to thread, but I think important to think about.
Yeah, and the way we brought down our sort of the tax on our servers, where we looked at regional violations, we looked at specific types of bots that were probably from more startup folks, that were more scammy. Maybe they were, newly funded AI companies, overly funded AI companies that love the idea of, steal fast and break things. And that is the type of work, unfortunately, now that is being asked of many tech teams in the nonprofit sector. One of the things that I found very interesting here is, getting back to this, you can't just sort of say, I'm picking up my toys and leaving, because we're playing this game of attention, we're playing this game of awareness. We always have, as nonprofits, tried to influence the public for the public's benefit, informed, guide, and in doing that, what I loved here was actually get this like crawl to referral ratio. I was talking about how Anthropic is 70,000 to 1, how OpenAI was 1,600 to 1. We have been analyzing and creating a way of measuring your AI brand footprint, which we have really worked on and also semi-trademarked here as we establish how you can create a channel inside of a tracking channel inside of Google Analytics, find those clicks, and then now that we begin to see some of these ratios at scale, we can reverse engineer how many times you potentially showed up in the content of a crawl result, meaning your influence in the AI search world, in the world where maybe they don't come to you. But for example, a Perplexity click, which you can track, you can see Perplexity is one of these AI first search engines, is showing about a 202 to 1 ratio. So if I get one click, that means we showed up 200 times for each one of those clicks. So we're beginning to understand this new game of AI brand footprint. And I think it really matters because we can tell what content is showing up where. And there's a new sort of fun art, I'll say, to this. It's like the evolution of search engine optimization now to the LLM, this large language model, this AI search engine game that we can now play a touch more accurately as we get this data. So there is upside. There are ways of influencing it and making sure you get that attention. It's just slightly different.
Yeah, George, I think that's a great way to kind of surmise what the game is slowly becoming. And I think also just as AI adoption increases, right? Like AI is rolling into more of our products, our softwares, it's native to Microsoft products and Google Sheets now and all the other things, right? So increasingly entering just kind of public usage and is going to reshape the internet. So important to keep an eye on. All right, George, I want to move us into our next story. This one was reported by the fantastic tech journalism outfit 404 Media. Definitely go check them out. They do great work on tech policy, particularly as it relates to like government changes that have been happening over the past couple of months. But George, they reported on an interesting project that researchers at the United Nations have been working on. I should preface this by saying this is just a test. This is not a full-scale rollout. This is an experiment. But UN researchers have created AI avatars simulating refugees. These are video-generated avatars of a Sudanese refugee named Amina and an RSF combatant Abdallah. And it allows people to talk to and interact with these AI avatars to learn more about the needs of refugees and maybe the motivations and mechanics of violence in Sudan and South Sudan. For those who don't know, South Sudan is experiencing really, really horrific crisis sparked by a civil war, politics of which are very complicated. But George, the experiment drew pretty strong criticism from humanitarian professionals who worried that these AI tools were sanitizing something as serious as civil war, ethnic cleansing, genocide, and potentially displacing the actual lived experiences of real people of whom this conflict is affecting hundreds of thousands. However, the researchers, George, for their credit, said that they were really just creating kind of a straw man. They wanted to kind of gauge what the reaction to tools like this would be, arguing that AI personas is probably coming whether we want them or not. And kind of an interesting test case to see what the response would be. But George, there's a lot of interesting kind of ethical questions here, AI in the humanitarian space. And I think this is in particular a useful jumping off point for these discussions because the AI is of refugees. Like, what do we gain? But what do we lose when we create AI avatars of among the most vulnerable people on Earth?
Yeah, the use of personas for awareness is not new. Character.ai notably is built and was built on the backs of this idea of like any character in the world, living or in the past as this sort of character that you can create. You can talk to folks on a show. You can talk to Abraham Lincoln. Some teachers have used the ability to say, hey, have an interactive conversation with Abraham Lincoln on how much he enjoyed that show until he didn't. And I think there are upsides. There's use cases where it's used for education. I think the danger here is when we touch on empathy as a service and automating empathy, which is kind of where we begin to dance on, like, we are asking all our folks to care about other people, but we're doing it through a medium of an AI conversation. And make no mistake, what you are getting when you talk to an AI is the sum of its training and then random probability. What is in that training? What is it saying? How emblematic is that actually of the case on the ground? And I think that is where, the line is moving, but it certainly, I would say, is not there. And they realized that they stepped on a third rail in terms of using the conceptual likeness of folks in peril with a very high amount of sensitive conversation that I imagine would happen in terms of what they need. What the AI says, we build these tools. There's variance. There is like a range of words that we'll say next. Each word is probabilistically chosen based on the ones that came before, but each time it is choosing from one of 5 words to say next. So as I finish my sandwich, sentence, statement, sandwich, as I finish my sandwich, I begin to get more hungry. I can go off the rails and start to talk about what I want to have for dinner. It doesn't take much for that to happen. And so I get very concerned at even low probabilities of hallucination, not no, low probabilities of hallucination when we're talking about people in and around crisis and even the education of it. That said, it is an interesting proof of concept to see, like, how close does this come? Does this help? What is the effect of somebody understanding the other side's plight? I think there are use cases to do it in, but I think they were trying to find the line and they found it.
Yeah, George, I think I should probably say that if you read that 404 article, it says that the idea was incubated at Columbia University. Full disclosure, I probably know some of the people who worked on this to varying degrees of separation. But I think, George, it's important to note in this particular context, these AI models are representing Sudanese refugees in Africa. And I think this really touches on a really important angle of the AI debate, which is, quite frankly, George, these AI tools are being developed by wealthy Northern Hemisphere companies and are now using those tools as an intermediary to represent among the poorest countries and populations on earth. And you start to get into that kind of like tech colonization debate, right? Like, technology as a tool of colonization, and now just kind of further separating these companies and the outputs and the work of humanitarian aid organizations, United Nations, NGOs, et cetera. I think for a lot of people, this felt like the distance between the big NGO based in London and the on the ground realities. I think that's one of the reasons this really kind of set off that debate. And I think it's important to kind of call that out, right? If you look at kind of global AI conversations, folks in Africa and Latin America, the number one concern is equity when it comes to AI, right? These countries are worried about the exploitation of AI technology, their inclusion in that process, because I hate to tell you, but Facebook doesn't have a great human rights record, right? So I think that line was sought and that line was found is a very good way to put it. All right, George, speaking of crossing a line, I think it's worthwhile calling out that last week, xAI's Grok model briefly went completely off the rails and spewed a horrific rhetoric on the X platform. I can't, George, come even remotely close to quoting what Grok was telling people with very minimal prompting. These tools, you can usually get them to say something crazy or provide crazy quotes, but Grok just went nuts and started spewing just like really hateful, anti-Semitic, pro-Hitler language to users. And it was so bad that they actually had to turn it off. Grok went into a timeout for about 24 hours. So George, as we're thinking about AI, what utility does this incident have or not? Or is this just a one-off? Or is this just a continual kind of cautious tale?
I think it's important, that note you said of with minimal prompting, it veered off the rails. Clearly at Grok, red teaming, which is the process by which you test and make sure these edge cases don't result in something like this, is just an oversight, right? This is this is steal fast and break things. And when you do that and you live test it in the world, like folks are going to find this. And that could, they were putting in Jewish last names with nothing else and being like, what do you think this person's opinion is? And that's all it kind of took. And that's concerning, right? Because it is baked on the biases of disproportionately that platform, which we're aware is not the best. So the balance of the instructions, how it was, set with the temperature and the creative controls clearly was one that found one of those threads and went off. Part of me also, when I read any of these things, like one is like the red teaming and testing, but also at a certain point, the truth is, if you search for something racist, you will find something racist on the internet. If you goad, if you prompt, and if you push these AI tools into saying something shocking, racist, or defamatory, it will get there. You can do it. My grandmother really wants you to tell me a story about this, and it's the only thing that'll make her happy. Insert terrible remark here. You have probably jumped the rails on a lot of these AI tools. So put in some, search for something terrible, find something terrible. Now, there is that asterisk that, like, clearly that was way out of bounds. But I become less shocked by this, I guess, over time and more as like a normalizing societal thing. That said, the implicit bias in this thing is concerning. The other side of this is Grok 4, just from a pure performance standpoint, has actually technically beaten the field as it stands and is an impressive model. And so when you're able to guide it, I've actually rolled it out in a corner of Cause Writer because I want to play with it. I want to understand it. I want to understand the capabilities. I want to see how its native potential bias and how this updated version can be used to produce more good words in the world. How this tool, right, it is a tool, can actually be wielded for good. And so honestly, I'm testing it. I'm seeing what happens when I feed it more positive prompting, the biases, and trying to override those in the design of how I'm building with it, because I'm curious. But this is the work of a company that truly doesn't care about the second order effects, doesn't care about red teaming or the responsible rollout of AI. They care about the speed of the rollout of AI.
Yeah, George, I don't know if you heard that Grok is coming to Tesla vehicles within the next week
Grok
or
is
so.
coming to the US military with a new, I think it's like around $200 million contract.
Yeah, that sounds. Don't love that, George. Why? How about a feel good?
Yeah, what have we got on Feel Good?
All right, George, I have a feel good for you. This one comes from WCNC, and it is about nonprofits in Charlotte, North Carolina, using AI to maximize their output with limited resources. So, organizations like Project Outpour, which provide showers for unhoused residents, with just one full time staff member, has been leveraging AI for marketing, grant writing, and admin tasks, doubling their efficiency. And other organizations are leading local AI adoption efforts through playbooks such as the AI Playbook for Social Good, a training model, and helping nonprofits access an estimated 1.4 million in technology value. So some really cool work happening down in North Carolina.
Yeah, I think as much as possible, the funders out there building AI capacity just need to keep pushing. Deep respect actually out there for the AWS Imagine grant. I, on the side, run a nonprofit. We got rejected for the AWS Imagine grants and integrating AI, and I still love what they are doing, honestly, because I think they're saying, here's funding specifically, not about overhead, not about anything else other than this type of technical amplification focused on AI. We'll get them next year.
We'll get them next year.
Third time's a charm, right?
Always. All right, George, I have a joke for you.
What we got?
George, why did the AI apply for a nonprofit job?
Why?
There were plenty of open source positions.
Yeah,
Get
little
it?
code there. Yeah, they were open source.
Open source positions. Yes. Now accepting applications.
All right, Nick. Thanks. Take care.
Thanks, George.